Perfection is a lie Hollywood tells better than anyone. Behind the velvet curtains and golden statues were screaming matches, lawsuits, sabotage, and grudges that lasted decades. Some of the most iconic films ever made were built on hatred so real it bled into the performances. Co-stars refused to speak. Directors went to war with their own actors. Sets turned into battlegrounds. Tonight, we step inside the chaos because the drama you saw on screen was nothing compared to what happened when the cameras were not rolling. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, 1962. Long before the cameras rolled, this film was already a battlefield. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane tells the story of two aging sisters trapped in a decaying mansion. One is a former child star who never recovered from fame. The other is a once respected actress now paralyzed after a mysterious accident. The film is psychological horror dressed as melodrama. It is claustrophobic, cruel, and deeply personal. But what gives the film its electricity is not just the script, it is the volcanic hatred between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford. Their rivalry stretched back decades. Romantic jealousy, career competition, and public insults had already hardened into something ugly. When they were cast together, it was sold as stunt publicity. It was not stunt, it was real. Davis mocked Crawford's Pepsi connections after Crawford married the company chairman. Crawford resented Davis's awards and prestige. On set, they weaponized method acting. In one scene, Davis had to drag Crawford across the floor. Crawford secretly added weights under her costume. Davis later claimed she pulled with everything she had. Crawford said she suffered real injuries. Each accused the other of sabotage. The cruelty spilled beyond performance. Davis allegedly kicked Crawford in the head during a fight sequence. Crawford reportedly complained to the studio about Davis's behavior almost daily. The tension was so thick, crew members described walking on glass. Director Robert Aldrich struggled to maintain control while secretly benefiting from the authenticity of their hatred. Every insulting character carried personal venom. The result is extraordinary cinema. The fear in Crawford's eyes feels lived in. The manic fury in Davis's performance feels unfiltered. Audiences sensed something dangerous beneath the surface. The film became a hit and earned Davis an Academy Award nomination, so Crawford campaigned behind the scenes to undermine her rival during awards season. When Davis lost, Crawford accepted the Oscar on behalf of another nominee. It was a final twist of the knife. What makes this feud remarkable is that the hostility sharpened the film. The toxicity fueled the performances. Yet it also confirmed that the golden age glamour was often a lie. Beneath the powder and lighting was insecurity, rage, and survival instinct. But as vicious as Baby Jane was behind the camera, the next entry involves fist threats and a confrontation that nearly shut production down entirely. Three Kings, 1999. Three Kings looks like a stylish desert caper on the surface. It follows four American soldiers at the end of the Gulf War who stumble upon a map that leads to stolen Kuwaiti gold. What begins as greed slowly transforms into a moral awakening. The film shifts from swagger to conscience. It questions American intervention and the illusion of heroism. Its tone is sharp, restless, and politically charged. But behind the scenes, the tension was not fictional. Director David O. Russell ran the set with an intensity that many described as combustible. He demanded spontaneity. He shouted instructions mid-take. He pushed actors past comfort. George Clooney entered the project with star power and professionalism, but also with strong opinions about how people should be treated. That collision was inevitable. Crew members later described Russell humiliating extras and screaming at department heads. Clooney confronted him. At first, it was verbal. Heated exchanges, accusations. The temperature kept rising. During one argument, Russell allegedly grabbed a crew member. Clooney stepped in. The confrontation escalated into a physical altercation. Accounts vary, but multiple sources confirmed that shoving occurred. Production nearly halted. The atmosphere became fractured. Some sided with the director, who was chasing artistic authenticity. Others supported Clooney, who believed a set should never cross into intimidation. The irony is painful.
A film about American soldiers navigating moral chaos was itself unraveling under ego and aggression. Yet the finished film carries remarkable energy. The performances feel raw and unpredictable. Mark Wahlberg, Ice Cube, and Clooney delivered layered portrayals that mixed cynicism with awakening. The chaotic desert sequences feel alive because, in many ways, the cast was working through real tension. The conflict sharpened the edges of every scene. Clooney later spoke publicly about the incident. He admitted he would defend crew members again if necessary. Russell acknowledged the set was difficult. Over time, both men continued successful careers, but the production of Three Kings remains one of the clearest examples of a classic film nearly derailed by personal conflict. The lesson is uncomfortable. Great art can emerge from volatile environments, but volatility has a cost. In this case, it risked safety and unity. And if you think shouting matches and shoving are extreme, wait until you hear about a production where the lead actor and director went to war so publicly that the director tried to erase his own name from the film. American History X, 1998. American History X is not an easy film to watch. It follows Derek Vineyard, a charismatic white supremacist who spirals into violent extremism and then confronts the consequences of hate after serving time in prison. The story is raw, direct, and deeply uncomfortable. It forces the audience to witness racism without disguise. The curb stomp scene alone became one of the most shocking moments in modern cinema. But the brutality on screen was matched by chaos behind the camera. Director Tony Kaye envisioned the film as a stark, almost documentary-style portrait of ideology and redemption. He shot it with deliberate restraint and a cold aesthetic. Edward Norton, who played Derek, delivered a committed, transformative performance. Yet once filming wrapped, the real battle began in the editing room. Norton reportedly believed the emotional arc needed more depth and more screen time for Derek's transformation. The studio sided with him. Scenes were reshaped, the structure shifted. Kaye felt his vision was being dismantled. He accused the studio of betrayal. He accused Norton of overstepping his role. What followed was unprecedented. Kaye publicly denounced the film. He attempted to remove his name from the credits and replace it with a pseudonym. He purchased full-page ads attacking the studio. Lawsuits were threatened, meetings turned explosive. The hostilities spilled into the press and damaged reputations. Crew members described the production atmosphere as fractured and intense. Instead of celebrating a powerful story about confronting hatred, the creative team was divided by ego and control. The irony was impossible to ignore. A film about dismantling toxic ideology was itself consumed by toxic collaboration, and yet the finished product became a landmark film. Norton earned an Academy Award nomination. The movie is still studied for its depiction of radicalization and redemption. Critics praised its emotional weight and stark honesty. The performances feel authentic and bruised, perhaps because the film itself was bruised in the making. Accuracy matters here. The feud was not rumored, it was documented in interviews, court filings, and public statements. Kaye never fully reconciled with the experience. Norton's involvement in editing became part of Hollywood lore. The film survived, but the collaboration did not. If American History X shows what happens when artistic control becomes warfare, the next entry proves that sometimes the hostility is not about editing or ego. Sometimes it is personal from the first day of shooting and so intense that romantic scenes had to be filmed with stand-ins because the stars refused to stand next to each other. I Love Trouble, 1994. On paper, I Love Trouble should have been effortless charm, a romantic comedy about two rival Chicago reporters chasing the same story. Sparks fly, banter snaps, attraction simmers beneath professional rivalry. It follows the classic screwball formula made famous in the 1940s. Fast dialogue, sexual tension, opposites forced into proximity until resentment becomes romance. When the studio paired Julia Roberts at the height of her stardom with Nick Nolte, known for his rugged presence and gravel voice, it looked like a winning combination.
Instead, it became one of the most notorious personality clashes of the decade. Reports from cast and crew described immediate friction. Roberts allegedly found Nolte abrasive and dismissive. Nolte reportedly considered Roberts demanding and aloof. Their dislike hardened quickly. According to multiple accounts, they insulted each other openly between takes. Eye contact became minimal. Conversations were reduced to necessity. The hostility grew so severe that many scenes were shot using body doubles. Reverse angles were crafted to avoid placing them in the same frame. Editing stitched together performances captured separately. For a romantic comedy built on chemistry, the absence of warmth was fatal. Director Charles Shire attempted to mediate. The script leaned heavily on witty exchanges, but delivery requires rhythm and trust. Without it, the repartee feels mechanical. Viewers sense something artificial. The smiles rarely reach the eyes. The tension did not read as playful rivalry. It read as contempt. Public comments later confirmed the bitterness. Roberts described Nolte as completely disgusting in one interview. Nolte responded that she was not a nice person. Neither retracted their words. The feud outlived the film. Accuracy is clear here. This was not a rumor invented by tabloids. The use of stand-ins is widely documented. Industry insiders have spoken about the fractured set environment. The film underperformed and quickly faded from cultural memory. What makes this example fascinating is that, unlike darker dramas where tension can heighten intensity, a romantic comedy depends on mutual energy. Without trust, there is no spark. Without spark, there is no illusion of love. But if I Love Trouble collapsed under quiet hostility, the next entry erupted in loud, unpredictable chaos. This time, the conflict involved a mercurial movie star who defied the director at every turn, and a production so unstable that it became legendary for all the wrong reasons. The Island of Dr. Moreau, 1996. The Island of Dr. Moreau was supposed to be a prestige adaptation of the H.G. Wells novel, a dark science fiction parable about a mad scientist who splices animals and humans together in pursuit of twisted perfection. It explores power obsession and what happens when morality is abandoned in the name of control. On screen, the island is feverish and surreal. Hybrid creatures roam the jungle. Civilization collapses under the weight of ego. Behind the scenes, the collapse was not fictional, it was operational. The production began under director Richard Stanley, who had spent years developing the project. He was fired days into filming after conflicts with the studio. John Frankenheimer was brought in as replacement. That shift alone destabilized Moreau, but the true volatility came from the cast. Marlon Brando arrived grieving the recent death of his daughter. His behavior became unpredictable. He reportedly refused to leave his trailer at times. He wore eccentric costumes, including a white ice bucket as a hat during rehearsals. He requested bizarre script changes. Frankenheimer grew frustrated. Communication deteriorated into sarcasm and resentment. Val Kilmer had originally been cast in the lead role, but reduced his part after personal issues. Even so, his clashes with Frankenheimer were frequent. Accounts describe shouting matches and refusals to follow direction. Crew members later stated that tension between Kilmer and the director disrupted scheduling and morale. Frankenheimer himself did not hide his anger. He publicly criticized Kilmer after production wrapped. He admitted the experience was miserable. The environment felt chaotic and adversarial. Weather complications and budget overruns intensified pressure. Accuracy here is not speculative. Multiple documentaries, including Lost Soul, The Doom Journey of Richard Stanley's Island of Dr. Honeba Murad, detailed the dysfunction. Cast and crew interviews confirmed the breakdown in communication and trust. The finished film was widely criticized. Its narrative feels disjointed. Tonal shifts are abrupt. What was intended as psychological horror became infamous for behind-the-scenes madness. The irony is sharp. A story about a tyrant losing control of his creation mirrored a production losing control of itself. Sometimes art survives turbulence, sometimes it becomes defined by it. And yet, even this chaos did not involve physical confrontation between two leading men in the middle of filming. The next entry features a director so driven and a star so unwilling to yield that their clash escalated beyond words into something far more volatile. Blade Runner, 1982. Blade Runner is now considered one of the most influential science fiction films ever made. Set in a rain-soaked dystopian Los Angeles, it follows Rick Deckard, a weary Blade Runner tasked with hunting rogue replicants who look and feel human. The film questions memory, identity, and the meaning of being alive. Its atmosphere is hypnotic. Neon blows through smoke. Music hums like a mechanical heartbeat. It feels controlled, deliberate, almost meditative. The production was anything but calm. Director Ridley Scott arrived from Britain with a precise visual vision. He storyboarded obsessively. He pushed for perfection in lighting and framing. Harrison Ford brought his own instincts. He favored efficiency. He valued character clarity. The friction began quietly. The most famous point of contention was the voiceover narration, whilst the studio insisted on it, fearing audiences would not understand the story. Ford disliked the device. He reportedly delivered the lines with flat detachment, hoping they would be unusable. Scott later admitted the narration felt forced. Multiple cuts of the film would eventually remove it entirely. There was also tension about the film's core mystery. Was Deckard himself a replicant? Scott has long implied yes. Ford has maintained the opposite. During filming, the ambiguity became a source of frustration. Without agreement on the character's identity, performances can drift. That philosophical divide lingered for decades. Crew members described a set divided by exhaustion and pressure. The night shoots were relentless. Rain machines ran constantly. The schedule slipped. Ford and Scott clashed over pacing and tone. At one point, Scott addressed the crew and allegedly compared American workers unfavorably to British crews. Morale dipped further. Accuracy matters here. Interviews over the years from both Ford and Scott confirmed the strain. This was not hatred in the theatrical sense, but it was deep creative friction. It shaped the atmosphere of the production. Yet the finished film carries an eerie authenticity. Deckard's detachment feels real because perhaps it was. The replicant's longing feels sharper against his emotional fatigue. The film initially underperformed, but grew into a masterpiece with later cuts, restoring Scott's preferred vision. Blade Runner proves that conflict does not always scream. Sometimes it hums beneath the surface like a malfunctioning circuit. But if quiet philosophical disagreement created tension here, the next film involved explosive arguments and an aging legend who refused to take direction from anyone, including the man hired to direct him. The Score, 2001. The Score is a sleek crime thriller set in Montreal. It follows Nick Wells as an aging master thief who plans one final job before retiring. He partners with a young, ambitious criminal to steal a priceless scepter from a heavily guarded customs house. The story is built on tension and mistrust. Two men circle each other, testing loyalty and patience while planning the perfect crime. The film depends on quiet calculation and mutual respect that never fully forms. That theme mirrored the reality behind the camera. Marlon Brando returned to the screen after years of erratic appearances. By this stage of his career, he was both legendary and unpredictable. Director Frank Oz, known for disciplined, structured filmmaking, found himself in constant friction with the actor. Brando questioned direction. He resisted rehearsals. He reportedly mocked Oz and refused to call him by name at times. Accounts from production state that Brando would not take instruction directly from Oz. Instead, he communicated through Robert De Niro, who became a reluctant mediator.
Imagine the irony. A film about criminals struggling to trust each other was being held together by one actor, translating between another actor and the director. Tension built daily. Oz wanted efficiency and precision. Brando worked on instinct and impulse. There were delays. There were confrontations. Crew members described the atmosphere as strained and unpredictable. De Niro attempted to keep the peace, but even he could not erase the hostility. Accuracy here is supported by interviews from Oz and industry reports at the time. Oz has spoken openly about the difficulty of directing Brando. The experience left a lasting impression on him. Yet watch the film closely and something fascinating emerges. The uneasy dynamic between the characters feels authentic. When Brando's Nick Wells grows irritated with his young partner, the frustration feels lived in. The guarded conversations carry weight because real tension hung in the air. The score performed modestly at the box office and received mixed positive reviews. It was not destroyed by the feud, but it was undeniably shaped by it. The film became Brando's final theatrical release before his death. That fact alone adds gravity. Some productions implode spectacularly. Others endure slow-burning discord that erodes collaboration from within. And if you think generational ego clashes are volatile, the next entry takes us back to the Golden Age, where rivalry was not subtle or professional, it was deeply personal and fueled by pride that refused to bend. Batman Forever, 1995. Batman Forever was designed to be spectacle. Neon Gotham, operatic villains, a tone brighter than its predecessor, yet still wrapped in comic book darkness. The story follows Bruce Wayne facing the dual threat of Two-Face and the Riddler while wrestling with his fractured identity. It is flamboyant, theatrical, and deliberately larger than life. That excess was not limited to the screen. Jim Carrey entered the production at peak comedic momentum. His performance as the Riddler is elastic, unpredictable, and hyperkinetic. Every gesture is amplified, every line delivered with manic rhythm. For some, that energy was electric. For others, it was exhausting. Tommy Lee Jones portrayed Two-Face with calculated menace. He favored discipline and restraint. According to multiple interviews, the contrast between Carrey's improvisational style and Jones's seriousness became combustible. Carrey later recounted a dinner encounter where Jones reportedly told him he hated him and could not sanction his buffoonery. Whether those words were exact or paraphrased, the sentiment reflects real discomfort. On set, the divide widened. Carrey thrived on spontaneity. Jones reportedly found it disruptive. In the tone of the film demanded theatrical villains, yet the actors approached that tone from opposing philosophies. Director Joel Schumacher attempted to maintain harmony, but the friction was apparent. Accuracy in this case comes primarily from Carrey's own accounts and corroborating industry anecdotes. Jones never fully embraced public discussion of the conflict, but did not deny tension. Crew members have spoken about the awkward atmosphere during joint scenes. Despite the discord, the film succeeded commercially. Audiences embraced its colorful aesthetic and exaggerated performances, yet critics noted tonal inconsistency. Some felt the villains seemed to exist in different movies. That fragmentation may reflect the real-world dynamic behind the masks. Batman Forever did not collapse because of hatred, but the tension undeniably influenced its rhythm. When characters share the frame without cohesion, viewers sense it. Still, this feud remained mostly verbal and stylistic. The next entry features something far more volatile, a sports drama where competitive intensity spilled into reality. A fight so real that it blurred the line between choreography and assault. And when tempers flare around cameras, the consequences can echo long after the final whistle. Any Given Sunday, 1999. Any Given Sunday is chaos by design. It follows a fictional professional football team navigating ego, injury, fame, and the brutal economics of the sport. Coach Tony D'Amato fights to maintain authority, while young players chase glory and veterans cling to relevance. The film pulses with speed and aggression. Helmets collide, cameras spin, dialogue overlaps. It feels less like a sports movie and more like a battlefield report. Director Oliver Stone wanted authenticity. He encouraged improvisation. He pushed actors to feel the violence rather than perform it safely. That creative philosophy carried risk. Tension between cast members began simmering early. Competition for screen presence mirrored the rivalry of their characters. Jamie Foxx and LL Cool J both portrayed players with strong personalities. During a locker room confrontation scene, the argument escalated beyond script. According to multiple reports, the exchange became physical. Punches were thrown, crew intervened, police were reportedly called to the set. This was not staged aggression.
It was a genuine altercation that disrupted production. Both actors later downplayed the severity, yet acknowledged tempers flared. Stone himself admitted that the atmosphere was intense and at times volatile. He sought realism, but realism sometimes pushes performers into dangerous territory. Accuracy here rests on documented interviews and production accounts. The altercation was covered by entertainment media at the time. It became part of the film's legend. Watching the finished movie, you can sense rawness in the locker room scenes. Anger feels unfiltered. The energy borders on combustible. In some ways, the conflict enhanced the realism Stone pursued, yet it also exposed how thin the line can be between method immersion and genuine hostility. Any Given Sunday divided critics, but gained appreciation for its kinetic style and emotional ferocity. It remains one of the most visceral sports films ever made. Still, as intense as a physical fight may be, it pales compared to a feud that spanned decades and defined Hollywood rivalry itself. A conflict rooted not in creative difference, but in wounded pride, public humiliation, and a lifetime of resentment that finally exploded under studio lights. And that brings us to the top of our countdown, a film whose very existence feels like an experiment in controlled hatred. A production where every glare was real, every insult carried history, and every scene trembled with personal vendetta. Cleopatra, 1963. Cleopatra was never just a movie. It was an empire collapsing in real time. The film tells the story of the Egyptian queen and her political and romantic alliances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. It was conceived as an epic, lavish sets, monumental costumes, thousands of extras. 20th Century Fox wanted grandeur that would dwarf every historical film before it. What they got instead was financial disaster and scandal that nearly destroyed the studio. At the center of the storm stood Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. Taylor was already the highest-paid actress in the world when production began. Filming started in London, but spiraled into chaos almost immediately. Taylor fell gravely ill with pneumonia. Production halted, insurance complications mounted, sets were abandoned. The entire shoot relocated to Rome at enormous cost. Then came the affair. Taylor was married, Burton was married, both were international stars. During filming, their relationship became public and explosive. The Vatican condemned them, the press hunted them, photographers camped outside studios. The scandal overshadowed the film itself. But the toxicity was not just romantic scandal. Director Joseph L. Mankiewicz battled the studio over control. Scripts were rewritten constantly. Burton and Taylor's relationship influenced scheduling and morale. Cast members felt secondary to the circus around them. The budget ballooned past $40 million, which at the time was astronomical. Fox nearly collapsed financially. Accuracy here is firmly documented. Delays, rewrites, public condemnation, budget overruns. The film became synonymous with excess and chaos. And yet, when you watch Cleopatra, you feel the intensity between Taylor and Burton. Their chemistry burns because it was real. Their scenes pulse with dangerous intimacy. The line between performance and reality dissolves. The film became the highest-grossing movie of its year, but it was still labeled a financial catastrophe due to its staggering cost. Careers survived, the studio barely did. Cleopatra stands as the ultimate example of how scandal and on-set turmoil can overshadow artistic ambition. It is remembered as much for its chaos as for its spectacle. And that is the uncomfortable truth behind this entire countdown. These films were not built in harmony. They were forged in ego, pride, rivalry, and real human conflict. Sometimes that tension sharpened the art. Sometimes it nearly destroyed it. But in every case, the illusion of Hollywood perfection cracked under pressure. Now you truly have 10 different classic films defined by real, documented feuds and toxicity. No repetition.